Hey, so my name's Johnny Mercer, and I've decided to come across and do some work with a really exciting company that's coming to completely reshape the veterans employment space in the UK. It's headed up by Tom, who's come over from Australia. And it's basically an amazing platform to get people into work. Having a job is like the single biggest factor that improves the life chances of veterans. Tell me a little bit about yourself and the company.
So we started the company WithYouWithMe 7 years ago.
Yeah.
After serving 8 years in infantry.
Right.
I grew up in estate housing.
Yeah.
In Australia. My family's originally from York. Came over on the Second Fleet, 1789 as convicts.
Right.
And we've served in the Australian military for 150 years as riflemen.
Yep.
So I hate injustice. So I thought, if I hate injustice and I've got a big mouth and I'm good at fighting,
yeah,
and I probably should do what all my other family members do and join the infantry at 18. So I did. Got me out of a pretty shitty life. Realised I hated orders.
Yeah.
Became an infantry officer. Led a 60-man combat team in Afghanistan. Loved it. Fortunately, was significantly injured after that. Medically discharged, and at 26, I found myself without a place to live, without a job.
Serious.
Yeah. And then no one wanted to hire me, so we started WithYouWithMe because no one wanted to hire us.
Right. And tell me the genesis of it. So you got a situation where you've come out, you got nothing, right? You're 26, you're at the end of a career you wanted to do. You got nothing, you've got no job, no house. And what's the kind of like kernel of the problem that you identified?
Well, I have my own problem. Maybe I can talk about that first, and then I can talk about the other problem. So yeah, like I went home for like 3 days.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd been home in like 8 years, so
right.
There's no way I could live there.
Yeah.
So about 12 months earlier, I got told I wouldn't walk again properly. So I told the army to go fuck itself. I'll walk again.
Right.
In an absolute egotistical fashion.
Yeah.
I paid for my own stem cell, walked again. Did our basic fitness assessment, so you know, you run, push-ups, sit-ups, no issues. Was preparing to go to Iraq as part of the counterinsurgency against ISIS, and went to do the combat PESA, which is like, think of it like your battle PT assessment.
Yeah.
All the weight on a ruck.
Yeah.
Knees kept collapsing. So no matter what I did, even after all that rehab, I couldn't be a warrior anymore.
Yeah.
I ain't gonna ride a desk, so.
Yeah.
I got told that was it.
Yeah.
It's time for you to go. We started to apply for hundreds of jobs.
And what was the response like?
Terrible. I had like 15 interviews. I applied from everything from security guards through to.
And people just not interested, right?
Well, like I went to go the piece to the point where my brain shifted on the issue was when I realised it was not me.
Yep.
I was doing an interview for a bank.
Yeah.
To be a security guard at like 45,000 Australian a year, like dollar dues, so it's like maybe £20,000.
Yeah.
Right. And the young lady who's 23 is like, well, we think you're great, but you don't have any financial services security guard experience.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the fuck? I go, what's different about your building?
Yeah.
In finance, anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I asked her a question, and I started asking a few questions because, you know, I'm one of those people in the military that you would identify as a heat seeker or maybe good at field, but not barracks.
Okay.
And I hate injustice, and I'm starting to think this is pretty unjust. So I ask her, well, why do you want to hire veterans then? And she goes, because they're on time. And I said, well, you know, when you do your taxes, you pick an accountant because they give you better return on investment? Or do you pick an accountant because they're more boring and the best ones are more boring? And she looked at me and just went, I go, because you're pretty much taking a whole group of people that are extraordinarily different, that have extraordinarily different skills, and wrapping us up into this homogenous layer.
Yeah.
And I've never been fucking on time in my life in the military. I was constantly on the fucking parade ground because of it. So, you know, that doesn't make any sense. So we worked out I worked out there were two issues. One, I'm an infantry officer with a degree, and I can't get a job as a security guard. So what's going to happen to my men?
Yeah.
That may don't have some of those things, or any of them.
Yeah.
And then we sort of looked at it and said, well, there seems to be two issues. One, the way the labour market or the employment market looks at people is subjective, speculative data
Yeah.
based off your past performance that you've written.
Rather than what you're capable of, right?
Yep, and effectively the way they build a job description is the last person that was in the job.
Yeah.
So none of those things work, and we just end up hiring people that we know.
Yeah.
And the problem is, if you're a veteran, you spend so much time away, who do you know?
Yeah.
You don't know many people
Yeah.
that aren't a veteran. So we realised that fundamental system of valuing talent was not valuing someone based on their potential to do a job.
Yeah.
So that was a big problem. And then the second thing we worked out, and this is related to the largest employment gap in the market, which is tech skills, is that people were overeducated and underskilled.
Yeah.
So we have all these tech jobs,
Yeah.
and no one could fill it. So we just sort of thought, well, maybe we should learn tech skills. Maybe that's the way we get a job versus trying to change society.
Yeah. Okay. So that's really interesting, right? Because my journey is not too dissimilar, where I was basically motivated by this inherent injustice in veterans care more broadly, right? So away from employment at the moment, more broadly into society, right? And I thought, how am I going to change that? I thought I could go and work at a local authority, I could work at a charity. But I remembered, like, when I was dealing with politicians in the military, and I just remember thinking, if I had your job, I would stand on that box every day and, fight for these guys and correct this injustice of people coming out of the military, right, who were, like, deeply skilled people, but ending up in jobs that were well below, like, what they were capable of. And it wasn't injustice, right? If they knew somebody, they would go and work at a bank, or the officers generally as well would be all right 9 times out of 10 and would go and work in investment and make a lot of money. But actually the really talented guys who were operating complex weapon systems or communication systems or targeting systems or whatever they were, and seeing them come out and go through the system and ending up in jobs that are important, right? But were never ever anywhere near fulfilling their potential. And, that's why I went into veterans care and politics and I set up the UK's first Office for Veterans Affairs, and we've made a real difference and so on. But now I kind of want to take it to the next level. The single biggest thing that will improve a veteran's life and the life of his family is having a good job that is well paid, that is fulfilling his potential and makes him happy. And you guys are absolutely at the forefront of that. I love the way all you've got to do is the aptitude test online, and I've done them myself. And even if you're not looking to leave, like right now, it's really good to know what you could do outside, and it brings that perspective to what you're doing. And every single person who's either serving or leaving needs to sign up and do these tests.
Yeah, I think it's everyone's asked, like, how did you come up with what you're doing? And we're like, we didn't.
Yeah.
The army assessed our potential.
Yeah.
It picked our friends.
Yeah.
It put us in teams.
Yeah.
Those teams were trained to work as a team to do ordinary things.
Yeah.
And then we were put in extraordinary circumstances.
Yeah.
Again and again and again.
But then you come out, and that's just kind of lost, right? There's, that if you think of the talent wastage, right, that comes out of that to people who are now doing jobs that, I wouldn't knock these jobs, but I wouldn't say they were 100% happy and fulfilling all their potential and earning all the money they should be.
Sure.
And yet, the flip side to that is that you've got guys in these companies who perhaps aren't as technically capable, but actually knew the right people, right? Went to the right school, the right university, and they've landed on their feet and they're, happy and fulfilled and making a lot of money. And I want to change that round and actually level the playing field for opportunities and get as many of these gifted veterans into employment as we possibly can.
I don't, and I think something to note is that this isn't a veteran problem.
Yeah.
Society is really struggling to let anyone into it. And there's a lot of reasons why. Like we operate a commodity market for talent.
Yeah.
Not an asset. People aren't treated as an asset.
Yeah.
2, we are not skilling people as fast as the market requires. And 3, You know, we're significantly overcharging for education that's sold as an employment opportunity.
Yeah.
So, you know, what we realised going through this journey of helping veterans get a better job was that we got to the front of the bus and realised no one was driving it.
So that is a really good analysis, right? Because there are opportunities out there, absolutely, and the bus is kind of moving. But you're right, no one really is putting it all together and is in charge and like framing the whole thing in a way that that makes it accessible for everybody in a genuine sense, not who you know and which particular pathway you've come down, but literally anybody can do these aptitude tests, can find out what they're capable of, and then be linked with like really impressive companies and skilled jobs. And that is what is different here.
So by stumbling upon it for veterans, we realised that society also needs the same solution. So our mission has gone from helping veterans get their first job to helping their partners, to helping their kids, and to helping others. And whether we like it or not, we're duty bound now because the problem's so big. So, you know, the company's vision is really simple. It's to solve underemployment. There's no veteran in that title anymore. 75% of our 640 staff, though, are combat veterans that have never touched technology or business before. And, you know, I'm a CEO. I'm a fucking idiot. So if I can do it, you can definitely do it. I was an average rifleman, an average infantry officer, and no one wanted to hire me. So for me, you know, one of the things that really underlines our company is this value called Be Fierce, and it's a warrior value. And, you know, everyone's like, well, why are you pushing all veterans into technology? And I go, well, firstly, if you want a house, you should probably get a technology career. Because it's way better paid than anything else, and your knees are probably bummed anyway. Yeah. And you don't really want to be, you know, on your hands and knees for the rest of your life labouring. And two, if we get enough veterans into technology, we can actually change how a whole country hires people. Yeah. Because I don't need to train those thousands of NCOs, officers and soldiers, sailors and airmen to lead. Yeah. And they're going to come into these dysfunctional corporations and bureaucracies. Yeah. They're going to fix them. Yeah. And I fundamentally believe that. And I've had the benefit of growing a business where all of my staff now are shareholders. And one of the biggest reasons we're successful is we use aptitude testing, we use our own training, and they're the people that are like us. Yeah. That care about it. Yeah. So I'm pretty interested in, you mentioned before that you hated injustice and you wanted to get on the podium. Yeah. And like I'm lucky and unlucky in some ways that I help veterans get jobs now in a lot of countries. Yeah. Especially most of Five Eyes, right? Yeah. No one has done that. Yeah. What happened to you after you went to war and said on the whole issue, which I haven't seen it from any Veterans Affairs Minister at all globally? Yes, I think in my experience, you have to make a decision pretty early on, like why you're in the game, why you're doing it, and your motivations for it. And for me, I've always struggled with the amount of goodwill there is around and how people talk a really good game on veterans, and how that actually like translates in some, like even today, I was telling someone earlier I was coming here, they were like, wow, we can do something on that. There's all this kind of disjointed work, right? And I've always reflected on that from the position of, not if you like know people, if you know people at banks and other institutions where you can get jobs, but actually if you're literally coming out with nothing, right? You went in with nothing, you leave with nothing, but this incredible skill set, but in terms of, you know, you don't have the connections into these organizations. How do they actually access these opportunities? I thought, how on earth am I going to change that? And so, in a way, like you've gone into this sector, right? That is why I went into politics, to change. I cannot understand the way this UK in particular does Veterans Affairs. I guess it was kind of beaten into me over many tours in Afghanistan, spending time with guys and girls, and it's hard to explain like why I've made this my life's work, because I would never have said I would have done. Like 10 years ago, I was the same, right? Spending a lot of time in Afghanistan. I wouldn't say I was a particularly model soldier or particularly well behaved, right? But I would never have thought now, 10 years later,
that I would have then established the UK's first Office of Veterans Affairs, and then also walked away from that job, right? Because it wasn't being done well enough. I never envisioned that commitment to veterans. But the truth is, like, it is a searing injustice, and others just, in my view, don't see enough of it. Where you've got these incredibly talented people. It's about, I guess it comes back to this life chances thing, right? That irrespective of your background, why can't the opportunities all be the same? They should be the same. Right. And people talk about them being the same, but the reality is, if you spend time with people, they're not the same. Right? And you find out, how did you get that job, mate? Oh, I knew Bill, whose dad works in the stockbroker. Okay, fantastic for you. What about Pete in Plymouth, who doesn't know anyone who earns over £25,000 a year? How the hell is he going to access those opportunities? But he was a JTAC in Afghanistan, right? And he was dealing with the most incredible pressures, with the most incredible tech kit, making it work in the most incredible environment, right? But he's going to be a labourer for the rest of his life. Yeah. And I just thought, this is not right. Okay, and so I've worked with loads of different groups to get people into employment. You talk about spouses and other groups. I mean, there is a whole community. Just imagine for a minute how underemployed most spouses are, because they move around with their husbands, right? And these are, incredibly clever people, men or women, who literally get plucked from place to place to place and have to start again. And if you blend that with the modern way of life and the way you can, access stuff on the internet and access aptitude tests in our case, or indeed, work remotely for some of these bigger companies. I mean, it's not hard to fix, right? But we've got to just go about it the right way and be totally, ruthlessly committed to that.
Ruthless.
Yeah. Have I been ruthless? Yeah. I think, I've got my critics, right? I'd be the first to accept that. I totally accept I'm uncompromising on veterans affairs. I always have been, always will be. Yeah. And I make absolutely no apology for that, because
I don't think you need to.
No, but people think I do, right? Because people think it's unreasonable.
Well, do you know what happens, right? If you think about let's just say in Australia, the veteran unemployment issue was 30.2%, which it was. Yeah. I came out and said that. And my company got called fuck you, fuck me by a number of senior ex-military, military, and members of parliament. Okay. And
why?
Well, I'll explain. You've got 5,166 veteran charities in Australia. That's like one for a veteran that leaves a year. Fundamentally, transition, 0.25% leave with a mental health problem. So all of these people are saying we have mental health problems. I said, there's nothing wrong with veterans, society's wrong. Yeah. And they go, what do you mean? I go, well, people can't enter society. Let's say you've got a really healthy corporal. Yeah. Corporal can't get a job, goes to the mines. Yeah. Right? The reason he gets out of being an infantry corporal and artillery bombardier is because he spent so much time away. So now his wife leaves him. Yeah. So then he tries to get a job back home, which he can't afford. So he has to be a bartender as well as his normal job. And then all of a sudden they leave him a second time. So, that's just not being entered into society. There was nothing wrong with him when he left. Yeah. So what we said was a few things. And everyone, for a long while, it was very hard for me to process that. Right. Especially after, having to pay for my own healthcare, go through this whole thing, and serve the country, and then my whole family served the country, including winning VCs, that could go to track. It's really odd. So for me, I took a step back and I looked at it rationally, and I started to work out that what happens in these large systems that manage these large things is that generally everyone knows that something's wrong. Yeah. Okay. So. Yeah. So it's very true. Something's wrong here, but I'm just going to let it blow over. Yeah. And I'm just going to let the second thing blow over, because and I used to be really angry at people in the space, and I'd be like, it's a little bit easier to let it blow over and let someone else deal with it. Just sort yourself out. And then what ends up happening is the whole fucking house of cards comes down, and then guess what you have to deal with? Yeah. Me. And I'm a fucking monster. And I'm going to hold you to account. I'm going to pull the data out, and I'm going to change the way you need to exist. Because every time in history that there's been this huge bureaucratic thing that everyone just thinks will blow over, some dude or woman with a big mouth with an alternative opinion goes, that's enough. Yeah. And generally when they do that, the whole market comes from them, because they then have to admit that, one, what they did was wrong. Yeah. in little doses over time, and two, that they did nothing about it.
Yeah.
And it's what I found is getting attacked and is a way of people dealing with their guilt.
That's interesting, right? Because
it took me a long time.
Yeah, to work that out.
Yeah, a long time.
So I found aspects of politics.
How did that make you feel?
Yeah, I found aspects of politics really difficult, mate. I've, getting, obviously I got sacked, right? I made myself pretty unpopular, but it was when I reflected on it, right? And it was I'll be honest, it was a kind of a maturing process for me. I joined up when I was 19. I went straight from that into like frontline politics in the UK. And I had to learn that really quickly, like why people were reacting in that way. And part of me's kind of learned that the hard way. It's been pretty lonely at times and pretty tough, but it makes you all the more determined to make sure that other people don't go through it that way. And you kind of level that opportunity, level that playing field so that actually anybody can go to it. And I'm involved in like campaign groups now to get more veterans into politics, because that is ultimately the only way we're going to change it, right? People are always going to talk a good game, but as you've seen over the years, like that has not been followed up. Yeah. And now I'm looking to do that through a number of different ways, like working with you.
Yeah, one of the things that I used to say to people that would come at me and tell me to change is like, I don't care how many people I upset.
Yeah.
There is no way I'm continuing to exist under a 30.2% veteran unemployment rate. And me knowing, if I pulled 50 people I know in the army, 3 of them are dead to suicide.
Right, so that is why
I don't care exactly how many people I upset about it anymore.
So I have to get voted in, right? So sure. I don't go out to upset people, right? But I will not accept the current level of life opportunities for veterans in the UK.
Is that why you left that role?
I left that role because fundamentally, the government was not matching what it said it would do on veterans care in the UK.
Didn't hold up their side of the deal.
I had made those promises on behalf of the government, and we were not fulfilling them, particularly to Northern Ireland veterans. Now, it's been a year-long battle, right? But yesterday, actually, in the House of Commons, the UK government introduced legislation to end dragging these 80-year-olds to court in Belfast. And
how'd that make you feel?
Yeah, like a massive sense of a quiet but very massive in myself sense of achievement that I don't want any like credit for, right? But it makes it all worth it because
simple was worth the sacrifice.
Yeah, for me, yeah, because like I have no interest, I have no selfish interest here because I'm not doing it for myself, and it's interesting, right? Because when you're not doing it for yourself, you can kind of take a lot more than if you were doing it for yourself. And that's what I've worked out over the years, is that actually, like, I can just roll with the punches because I'm not in it for myself. I'm in it for the guy who left as a bombardier in Plymouth, who doesn't have the life opportunities that some of my mates who left as officers and go and work in the stock market. I'm not in it for myself. I'm in it for the guy who makes 3 suicide attempts and think there's no other way of doing it. So, the criticism is fair and I respect it, but it just doesn't bother me. And that's why, when I saw what you guys are doing in Australia and Canada about leveling that opportunity field for everybody coming out, irrespective of who they know, I want to make that a huge success in the UK, because there are good players in this space, but it's definitely not equal. It's definitely not level across the country. And actually using a successful platform like you have is a big opportunity, and I want to make it a success.
And we're also like your bastard sons, right? We're not your prodigal sons, which are the Americans, but we're your bastard sons.
You guys have done some of this stuff really well. Okay, you set up a Royal Commission into veteran suicide. Over here, before I was the minister, right, we didn't even record veteran suicide.
It took a long time to do that, though.
Okay.
Like we had to really. Yeah. And I wouldn't say that it has anything to do with me, because it doesn't. But when I said that there was that unemployment rate, I did 48 media placements, and
you did what?
I did like 48 media interviews, national news.
Yeah.
And every time the journalists would try to catch me, and they'd be like, the military is doing the wrong thing. I go, the military's job is to build
wars.
Yeah, to win the battle.
Yeah,
You're not here to outplace people.
Yeah.
So, this isn't the military.
Yeah, there's a degree of that. There's definitely a degree of that, and there's a pressure. So there is you're right about the society thing, right? But in this country, there is now that kind of willingness. Afghan and Iraq changed that in this country about people's understanding of what veterans need when they leave. But for me, it's about kind of moving away from that kind of sympathy thing, which is just not on the table, right?
No, we're here to win.
Exactly, right? To empathy. What is it actually like to be a veteran? And changing that outlook, if you like, you know, moving from all these bases to bases with a really highly skilled but specific skill set, if you like.
Yeah.
How are you going to transform that into something that is valued in the correct way in the real world, which civilian life is? It is the real world. The military is not the real world. In the real world, how are you going to use those skills to actually look after yourself and get a job that you are entitled to in civilian life? And
not only just get a job, lead people again. You know, so
exactly, lead organizations, right?
Give you a few data points, like, you know, the average age of raising capital, venture capital in Australia, 41 years old, white.
How old are you?
32 now.
Right.
Look 48, startup plus infantry. But the sort of point was, you know, we first raised $1 million at 26.
Yeah.
You know, over the course of the last 7 years, the business has grown at 500% a year. 1 year it grew by 13,000% revenue. You're talking about a bunch of people who have no skills, according to industry.
Can I just call you up on that? Right? Because I don't think it's a question of having skills.
Right.
It's no skills that are valued as commodities.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so it's not about having skills, because clearly
I have no share price.
You do have skills, right? You do have skills, otherwise you wouldn't be doing this. Veterans do have skills.
Oh, they have a lot of skills.
Exactly, right? So they're just not the commodities that are kind of valued.
We've never been entrepreneurs.
In a workplace that is actually spending money on trying to get those very same commodities of team ethos, turning up on time, leadership, values, ethics, spending money on their commodities to try and get those things you've already got. So the skill, right, is bringing that together and making a fantastic offer, not only, as you said, for veterans, but spouses and the whole community that has, you know, been engaged. I think, you know, this war on terror thing, I think has defined a whole generation of us who, some of us have been absolutely fragged over 20 years. And I think we've got a duty to kind of level that playing field and get society in a space where people can reintegrate and really fulfill their potential with the skills they've learned. If you think about the pressures going into Baghdad and Afghanistan in 2006, 8, 9, 10, when I was there, that experience is gold dust.
Yeah.
And it's about making that a commodity, not just who you know.
Well, I found it really fascinating, right? So, you know, over the course of 7 years, we've raised maybe 55 million. And, you know, you're talking about a bunch of guys and girls that have never really done anything in business.
Yeah.
And, you know, we ask, you know, our investors now globally ask us for more combat veterans, CEOs.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. And we said, why? He goes, we can't understand why you're so scrappy, why you don't stop, why you don't get tired, why you don't get gritty. And I go, well, let me explain something to you. When you join the army or the military, you get all your privileges taken off you. You're privileged to talk, walk, do anything you want. And then what the military does is it makes you earn it back as a group. And that fundamentally changes people from a egocentric society to an esoteric society. And what that does is it changes how you value people, how you value work and life, and your character.
Yeah.
And fundamentally what they worked out was, we want to invest in experienced combat veterans because they have the character to be great CEOs.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter the age.
Yeah.
And what I think that should say to people is, if a bunch of convict Australians with an economy that's not that big can produce a world-leading tech company in 7 years that trains thousands and thousands of veterans a year who never charge them a cent, their model's being used to change the Australian education system to remove subsidies, grants, all those things that don't work. then we shouldn't only be telling veterans that they can be technologists. We should also be telling them that if they learn technology, they could build technology businesses.
Yeah.
And those technology businesses can solve all different types of social impact problems that those large computer science companies can't solve, haven't solved.
Yeah.
And the reason they can't solve them is a lot of those engineers that have spent all their time on computers don't know anything about people.
Yeah.
So, AWS built a tool, Amazon built a tool that was like, we're going to start hiring people based off AI.
Yeah.
And all they ended up hiring was more men that weren't even as skilled because that's what their resumes had said. So, one of the biggest stories that we're saying is that not only, if you don't just want to be a technologist is a great stepping stone for you to build a business, lead people again, and solve a problem in your community.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things that keeps me up at night is, every veteran business that I know about is a t-shirt company or a coffee company or, not many people have gotten to the size that we've got with the workforce that we've got. In some places you could call us like a veteran Microsoft. And what's fundamentally keeps me up is that I don't want to fail and then everyone think, oh, those guys, they failed because they were that.
Yeah.
No, so
Weren't good enough.
we have a really, 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 really sort of powerful message that's, well, learn technology, have a comfortable job. And when you're ready, you should really consider looking at all of those problems in society or the environment globally that you hate, build a team of your fellow squaddies and try to do it. Because I fundamentally believe that the CEOs and founders that are going to run the next 10 to 20 years of companies, they're going to have to be social impact companies.
Yeah.
And there's no one better placed than someone that's had to lose all their privileges and then earn them back with others.
It's like
And I think that's very exciting.
yeah, it is exciting because you've got like a golden generation really of Iraq and Afghan veterans. Society would say they're broken, they're damaged and all the rest of it. I actually think it's a golden generation who've had like extraordinary experience, extraordinary life experiences. And all it is about transitioning that into a modernizing and transitioning workplace that is around all these jobs you're talking about, and that's exactly where WithYouWithMe fits in.
Yeah, and I would say we're extraordinarily lucky as a generation to have been in a global team.
Yeah. We are in a global team. It's a global coalition, right?
Correct,
You go to Kandahar, anywhere like that. It's
very easy to build an international business.
Yeah, it's a Five Eyes.
You work with each other before.
Let's make it work, right?
Yeah.
So what's the next lead?
WithYouWithMe? We want everything. We want the whole underemployment issue. I want to remove every resume from the face of the earth for every person. And I fundamentally want to remove all German HR software because it is not tasteful, it doesn't work, and the user experience is poor. And I think it'll take us 30 years to do it.
Okay.
We're at about year 7.
Okay.
I've probably got 2 years left as a CEO, because as a CEO, you have to get more agreeable as the company gets bigger, and I'm not agreeable. So I'm a big believer in potential over experience, so I'll put someone else in that can take the company forward. And we just have to focus on 3 things. We need to ensure we have a great product. We have a good product on a great product. A great product means that you shouldn't have to feel like you're having a full-time job applying for a job anytime in your career.
Yeah.
It should be easy, it should be personalized, it should harness your potential. 2, we have to keep employing people in our company from our own program.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter who that program eventually fills. It doesn't always have to be veterans. That's not what we're inclined to do. And then, last but not least, we will never, and we should never, charge anyone a cent who's unemployed and underemployed that needs a first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth chance. And that's what we're going to do. We're just going to do those 3 things.
Okay.
And we're just going to do them for for as long as it takes for me to chase out every big data AI, HR, Silicon Valley company, every Excel spreadsheet wannabe German HR software HR company, and I'm going to change every fucking recruiter that I need to convince people to look at someone and go, you know what? I can see your potential, and I'm going to train you.
Yeah.
And that concept only existed 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's what I care about. Personally, I hate everything about business. There's nothing about it that's, you can't taste it, you can't lick it, you can't touch it. It doesn't smell like anything.
Yeah.
I can still remember the smell of an army barracks. But it's a necessary tool to change this issue because of the scale that veterans, but the average underemployment rate in a Western economy is like 36%. So it's a very big problem.
Yeah.